Imagine for a second that you are just standing on this quiet, grassy hill. You're looking out over a picturesque harbor. The sea breeze is hitting your face, and it all just feels incredibly peaceful.
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect vacation spot, honestly.
Right. But here's the thing. Beneath your boots, the soil is hiding this deeply, deeply violent resume. Like if you dig down just a few inches, you might find discarded Iron Age pottery from 600 BC.
Wow.
Yeah. And then if you go a little further along the perimeter, the ground literally holds the blood of 400 medieval militiamen. Keep walking, and you're stepping over the unmarked graves of Russian soldiers. And encasing this entire hill, heavy, brutalist, World War II Nazi concrete.
It's just a profound juxtaposition, isn't it? Because when you look at a sweeping landscape, you usually you just see the scenery. We have this collective habit of romanticizing historical sites.
Oh, absolutely. We look at old stone walls and immediately think of, like, chivalry or simple, quiet times.
Exactly. But the reality is that the geography of why a fortress exists in a specific spot is almost never born out of romance. It's
Yeah.
rooted in survival. It's about logistics and, the kind of relentless conflict that fundamentally alters the Earth itself.
Yes, and that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. Today we're taking you to a single, seemingly quiet hill in the Vale, Guernsey.
Which is just a fascinating location.
It really is. It sits right there defending St. Sampson's Harbor in Bordeaux Harbor.
hmm
And to the casual observer, like someone just walking their dog today, it's just Vale Castle. Though originally, over 1,000 years ago, it was known as Le Château Saint-Michel.
Right.
Visually, it's this irregularly shaped fortress. It's got 6 rounded towers, a square gatehouse, and these sweeping stone curtain walls. But we're not just here for a dusty architecture tour.
No, definitely not. Because it's an architectural patchwork. And if you know how to read those stones, you start to see that the walls themselves they're a physical timeline of war.
And we're going to read those stones today. Thanks to our source material, which is this highly detailed breakdown of Vale Castle's history, we are going to uncover how this one single piece of real estate has acted as a literal magnet for 2.5 millennia of European conflict, piracy, and radical architectural evolution.
It really is a magnet. But to understand how a place built for peace becomes a magnet for war, we have to start at the very, very bottom layer of the dirt.
Let's do it.
Because geography dictates history. Long before anyone was pouring concrete or stacking granite, someone had to look at the specific hill and realize its strategic value.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the earliest evidence we have doesn't even start with castles or knights in shining armor. It starts way back with an Iron Age hill fort.
Right, thousands of years ago.
Yeah, back in 1980, archaeologists did these massive excavations right under the medieval outer bank of the castle. And what they found was a small turf bank containing pottery that dates all the way back to 500 to 600 BC.
What's crucial to understand about that early Iron Age settlement is its design. It features a double ditch and bank, which, interestingly enough, makes it entirely unique on the island of Guernsey.
Oh, wait, let's actually visualize that for a second.
Right.
When you say a double ditch and bank, we aren't just talking about a couple of garden trenches, right?
Right.
What is the mechanical purpose of digging 2 ditches into a hill?
Oh, it is a brilliant piece of early military engineering. A double ditch forces an attacker into an absolute nightmare scenario. Imagine you're trying to raid this hill fort, right? You charge down into the first ditch, instantly losing all your forward momentum.
You just stuck at the bottom.
Exactly. Now you have to scramble up a steep embankment, fully exposed, only to find yourself staring down into a second ditch. You are trapped in this predetermined kill zone, exhausting yourself before you ever even reach the primary defenders.
Wow.
So even 2,500 years ago, whoever was living on that hill recognized that its vantage point over the harbors made it a highly defensible choke point.
That is so smart. Okay, so fast forward a millennium and a half, and the cast of characters occupying that exact same choke point changes completely.
Entirely different world.
Yeah. In 968 AD, we see Benedictine monks arriving from the famous monastery of Mont Saint-Michel to set up the Abbey of St. Michael right there in the north of the island.
And they're essentially just looking for a secluded place to practice their faith.
Right. Then in 1032, a very important figure named Robert II, who was the Duke of Normandy and actually the father of William the Conqueror, he takes shelter there on his way to help Edward the Confessor.
A very lucky stop for him.
Extremely lucky. He is so grateful for the safe harbor that he rewards the monks with a massive tract of land known as the Clos du Val.
And that land grant completely changes the economic reality of the island. I mean, overnight, the monks are no longer just an isolated religious community. They are major landowners.
But with great land comes great vulnerability. Because in 1061, the island gets absolutely pillaged by pirates. So Duke William, who was soon to be William the Conqueror, sends his royal enforcer, a guy named Samson Danville.
Heavy hitter.
Literally.
Yeah.
And Samson actually teams up with the monks to drive these pirates out. Their reward for that victory is huge. Samson Danville and the monks are granted half the island between them.
Which is a staggering amount of territory.
Yeah. The monastery's portion becomes known as Le Fief Saint-Michel, and that's when the castle is first constructed as a structured safe refuge. But I had to pause here. Reading through this source, this feels like an action movie pitch.
Oh, it completely does.
Right. You have weaponized monks teaming up with a royal enforcer to fight off hordes of pirates. Weren't monks supposed to be like peaceful scribes quietly copying manuscripts in candlelit rooms?
It's a fantastic image, but we really have to completely strip away our modern sanitized view of what a monastery was in the 11th century. Back then, land equated to immense tangible wealth. Monasteries were economic powerhouses, operating essentially like feudal lords. They collected taxes, they managed agriculture, and they possessed incredibly valuable assets.
So they basically had a massive target on their backs.
Exactly. And in a volatile world full of opportunistic raiders, safe refuge didn't mean a quiet sanctuary where you just locked a wooden door and prayed for the best. It meant a highly militarized defense.
Wow.
Blending faith and fortification wasn't a contradiction for them at all. It was born out of pure, absolute necessity to protect their assets and their people from being slaughtered.
Okay, so they build this fortress, and for a while, it does the job. Establishing a defensible earthwork position to fight off unorganized, opportunistic pirates is one thing, but once you put a fortress on the map, you kind of stop flying under the radar, don't you?
You definitely do.
You start attracting the attention of highly organized, state-level military machines.
Precisely. A localized safe refuge is suddenly put to the ultimate test when the geopolitics of the 14th century arrive on its doorstep. And this era brutally proves that a defensive wall is only as good as the people defending it and, frankly, the scale of the army attacking it.
Yeah, the 14th century for Vale Castle sounds less like a strategic defense and more like an absolute meat grinder.
It's devastating.
During the English Channel naval campaign of 1338 to 1339, French forces capture the island. They breach the castle and they put its defenders to death. It is a total massacre. The French only end up withdrawing in 1340 because their navy gets critically crippled at the Battle of Sluys.
And unfortunately, the bloodshed on that hill doesn't stop there. Just a few decades later, in 1372, we see another massive, devastating assault.
Right. This one is led by Owain Logach, who was a guy with a legitimate claim to the Welsh throne, but was operating essentially as a mercenary commander fighting on behalf of France.
A very dangerous individual to have knocking on your door.
Definitely. It's an attack popularly known as La Descente Aragousais. Logach manages to kill 400 of the island militia before he finally withdraws. There's even a poem about this event that calls the castle Château de la Change, specifically noting it as the site of a brutal, desperate, last-ditch stand.
400 island militia members lost in a single assault is a staggering demographic blow to a community of that size. You have to imagine the psychological terror of that moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as I was reading this, I couldn't help but notice a glaring contradiction.
Oh.
Yeah, the whole point of building this place in the 11th century was to provide an impregnable safe haven. But if the French can just waltz in and massacre everyone in 1338, and then a Welsh insurgent can slaughter 400 people a few decades later, wasn't the original castle actually a terrible design?
This raises an important question, and it's exactly the right way to look at the architectural evolution of the site. The 11th century earthworks and early defenses were designed for 11th century problems, namely disorganized pirates.
Oh.
They were wholly inadequate for 14th century state-sponsored warfare. When you have a professional army with siege equipment and organized tactics, an old earth and timber fort basically becomes a death trap. Those horrific massacres you just described are directly connected to the archaeological data found during those 1980 excavations.
So the archaeology actually proves that they learned their lesson.
Yes, absolutely. The excavations prove that the massive late medieval stone upgrades to the castle were built right around 1370 to 1400. That timing isn't a coincidence. The catastrophic failure of the old defenses is exactly why they invested in a massive stone upgrade. They learned in blood that their walls just weren't high enough or strong enough.
Okay, wow. So surviving Welsh insurgents and French navies forces them to evolve. They get this massive stone upgrade moving into the 15th and 16th centuries,
Yeah.
and the upgrades are heavy duty.
Oh, they spare no expense.
We're talking granite curtain walls, a gatehouse, buttresses, a powder house, a guard room, and they finally dig a well inside the walls. For anyone who isn't, an architecture buff, what does an upgrade like a curtain wall and buttresses actually do for a fortress mechanically?
Sure. So a curtain wall is essentially the massive, continuous outer wall of a castle that connects the defensive towers. It's the primary shield. And buttresses are thick, protruding columns of stone built against those walls to give them extra support.
To keep them from collapsing?
Exactly. You need that support because warfare was changing again. They weren't just worried about men with swords and ladders anymore. They were preparing for gunpowder and heavy artillery. By digging a well inside the walls and building a dedicated powder house, they were transitioning Vale Castle from a medieval stronghold into a modern artillery platform designed to survive a prolonged, explosive siege.
And as it becomes this modern artillery platform, it gets dragged directly into global and internal politics. By 1615, we get this fascinating split in responsibility. The local island is required to maintain Vale Castle, while the crown takes on the maintenance of Castle Cornet, which is another massive fortress right there on Guernsey.
And that administrative split becomes a highly, highly volatile problem during the English Civil War.
Oh, I bet.
Because when the war breaks out, the island of Guernsey and, by extension, Vale Castle supports the parliamentarians. They actually station parliamentarian troops right there at Vale. But Castle Cornet, they remain loyal to the crown and support the royalists.
I just picture this as two heavily armed neighbors staring each other down across the street from their respective front porches. You have two massive fortresses on the exact same island, pointing their arsenals at each other because of a civil war happening all the way over in England.
It is a great visual, but, with a lot more collateral damage than just two neighbors glaring at each other. The real issue wasn't just them pointing guns across the island, it was the logistical nightmare of maintaining supply lines and the constant agonizing tension of living in a community literally divided by heavy artillery.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
It was. And as the centuries progress, the neighborhood only gets more tense. By the time we hit the late 18th century, the American and French revolutions turned France into a primary enemy once again.
So Vale Castle gets yet another facelift to deal with the French threat. They add military barracks, a signal mast to instantly alert the island of approaching ships, a fire beacon for the night, and serious firepower.
Very serious firepower.
They install one 24-pounder cannon and two 9-pounder cannons. And when we say a 24-pounder, we are talking about a cannon that fires a solid iron ball weighing 24 pounds at terrifying speeds, designed to absolutely splinter the hull of an approaching wooden warship.
The scale of defense was escalating dramatically. But it isn't just cannons and beacons that arrived during this period. In 1799, the sweeping geopolitics of the era bring 6,000 Russian troops to be quartered nearby at a place called Delancey.
And the obvious question you might be asking listening to this is, why on earth are thousands of Russian troops hanging out on an island in the English Channel?
Yeah, it seems pretty random, but it was part of the broader European alliances formed against the French Republic. Guernsey was used as a staging ground for these allied forces.
But this part of the source material was genuinely haunting to me. These Russian soldiers are brought in, and they don't die in some glorious battle. Hundreds of them die of disease in their camps.
It's tragic.
And they are buried right there at Vale Castle. You have to imagine what that felt like for those men being stationed thousands of miles from home, surviving combat, only to die of illness and be buried in the shadow of this old Norman castle.
It adds an incredibly somber layer to the soil there. It shifts the perspective, really. The castle wasn't just a machine of war. It was a holding pen for the human cost of these massive, abstract, global alliances.
And the military machine just kept demanding more from the geography itself. During the Napoleonic Wars between 1806 and 1808, they do something that is honestly hard to process. Remember how we said the castle defended a tidal passage called the Bray du Val? This passage essentially separated the north of Guernsey from the rest of the island.
Yes, Le Clos de Val was effectively a tidal island. Depending on the tide, it was completely cut off.
Well, the military decides that a tidal island is entirely too slow for moving troops and artillery around. So what do? They just fill it in?
They just get rid of the water.
Literally. They physically reclaim the land, permanently ending the separation of the island. This also allowed them to massively expand the nearby port of St. Sampson.
What's fascinating here is how warfare forces humanity to literally alter the earth, on a macro scale. Imagine the military deciding that a body of water is too inconvenient, so they just pave over it to speed up
That's
logistics.
mind-boggling.
We are no longer just digging double ditches like the Iron Age settlers. We are erasing the sea. Filling in the Bray-Duval tidal passage shows how fundamental geography is manipulated, engineered, and completely rewritten in the name of defense.
It permanently changed the map of the island. But as wild as that is, this constant state of preparation and geographical alteration was just setting the stage for the most visually jarring, devastating transformation of the castle, because the 20th century is about to arrive,
Yeah.
and it brought a very, very different kind of fortification.
The castle goes through its darkest chapter during the Second World War, and understanding this chapter is crucial to appreciating its transition into the modern-day cultural hub it is now.
Let's look at how that unfolded. In World War I, it's still operating militarily, holding a small garrison of the local Guernsey militia. In the years between the world wars, things actually calmed down, and those military barracks are used by the states as homes for everyday civilians.
A brief moment of peace.
Yeah, but then comes World War II. From 1942 to 1944, the German occupiers take over Guernsey. Specifically, a group called Organisation Todt moves into Vale Castle.
For context, Organization Todt was the civil and military engineering group of Nazi Germany. They were responsible for a massive, continent-spanning network of defensive structures known as the Atlantic Wall. And when they took over a site like Vale Castle, they were not interested in preserving its Norman heritage or its sweeping medieval architecture.
No, they absolutely were not. They demolished the historical barracks entirely. And then they pour concrete. Massive amounts of heavy, brutalist concrete defenses.
They completely remodel it.
They build 4 machine gun positions, 3 mortar pits, a vast network of trenches, personnel shelters, searchlight positions, and they install 2 large 10.5-centimeter field guns alongside flamethrowers. They even install 4 Tobruk pits. Can you explain what a Tobruk pit actually is? Because the mechanics of it are terrifying.
A Tobruk pit is essentially a sunken concrete cylinder built directly into the ground. It allows a single machine gunner to pop up, fire a devastating 360-degree sweep at approaching troops, and then instantly drop back down behind impenetrable concrete cover.
Wow.
When Organization Todt poured this concrete, they weren't just building walls, they were fundamentally redesigning the hill's geometry to eliminate any blind spots. They turned a 1,000-year-old defensive refuge into a highly calculated 360-degree killing zone, which they dubbed Stützpunkt Group Telfest.
It is a violent, almost alien imposition on the landscape. But what makes this so compelling is the extreme contrast that already existed in the cultural record of this specific site. Because while it has this history of brutal warfare and Nazi concrete, it has simultaneously served as a muse.
The arts. It's an incredible paradox.
Exactly. Despite all the blood, the massacres, and the cannons, this place inspired some of the greatest artists of the 19th century. J.M.W. Turner, who is arguably the master of landscape painting, actually visited and sketched the castle. Edwin Hayes painted it. Francis Gross and Robert Moody made detailed engravings of it. Even Victor Hugo, the legendary author of Les Miserables, explicitly mentions Vale Castle in his 1866 book, Toilers of the Sea.
And that brings us to how you can experience it today. Vale Castle is a protected monument designated as PM 124. It has actually been protected since 1938, right before the outbreak of WWII, and before that German concrete was even poured.
Oh, that's lucky timing.
Very. Today, it is open to the public, completely free of charge. You can walk the grounds, touch the medieval granite, and actually step down inside those German trenches and Tobruk pits.
So what does this all mean? I have to tell you, it's honestly hard to process the juxtaposition. You are standing in a concrete trench built by Nazi engineers, looking out over a pristine harbor that was painted by J.M.W. Turner and written about by Victor Hugo. It's built by weaponized monks and knights. And now people are throwing music festivals on it.
It's quite a shift.
The Vale Earth Fair, which is this massive community music festival, has been held inside the castle walls for over 40 years. How does a visitor even process that kind of visual and historical whiplash?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually makes a beautiful kind of sense. The German concrete didn't erase the Iron Age earthworks beneath it, just like the medieval stone didn't erase the 11th century monk's legacy. It simply added the latest, albeit darkest, layer to the timeline.
Right.
The fact that the local Guernsey community now uses that exact same space, a space designed for artillery and slaughter for a music fair, is a profound statement on human endurance. The architecture is forced to absorb the trauma of history, but the people living there today get to decide its current purpose. They reclaimed it.
That is an incredible way to look at it. To quickly recap the unbelievable journey of this one piece of real estate, we started deep in the dirt with 600 BC Iron Age pottery and double ditches. We moved up to pirate-fighting Benedictine monks in the 11th century.
Which is still my favorite part.
Right. We saw medieval massacres and Welsh invasions in the 14th century, forcing the shift to heavy stone walls. That was followed by Civil War standoffs and Russian graves in the 18th century, the erasure of the sea itself for logistics, and finally, we end up with German concrete bunkers hosting modern-day music festivals.
The takeaway here is about how you view the world around you. The next time you see a historical building, try not to think of it as a static, frozen object. See it as a living, breathing record. Think about how many unseen layers of human desperation, incredible technological innovation, and ordinary daily life are packed into the dirt beneath your feet.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Fast forward 1,000 years from now. Imagine archaeologists in the year 3026 digging up the soil at Vale Castle. What are they going to make of a thick, brutal layer of World War II Nazi bunker concrete, sitting immediately next to the discarded modern debris of a Vale Earth Fair music festival? What does that incredibly stark contrast say about how the spaces we inhabit absorb our deepest traumas and eventually find a way to heal?
It's a fascinating puzzle to leave for the future.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.